Hello, everyone, and welcome to Crystal Queer QA's podcast and our fourth and final episode of our mini Pride series, which is focused on being and becoming an LGBTQ ally. My name is Andrew Richardson, and today I am joined by Steve Costello, local Vice President of Green Mountain Power, community supporter, and recently declared LGBTQ ally, as well as Beth Richardson, who is a writer, former educator for Monadnock Regional School District, and an administrative assistant and food pantry director at a small church in New Hampshire, and also my soon-to-be mother-in-law. So thank you both so much for being here. We're finishing up this podcast series with another real-life conversation with myself, Steve, and Beth to help give more of an encompassing view of what it means to be an ally to the LGBTQ community. Our mission with these videos is to help folks to see that even though gender and sexuality may be complicated at times to understand, we can always have open and honest conversations to learn with and from each other, which in turn leads to becoming a better ally. So thank you both for being. Steve, I'll go to you first.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me, Andrew. I'm a native Vermonter, grew up in Burlington, have been living in Rutland County for about 20 plus years. And a lot of my work in Rutland for the company is about community and social development. And this has been a natural fit for that other work that I've been doing. And it's been a lot of fun to get involved and kind of help over the last month and a half or 2 months prior to Pride Month with a bunch of folks who are planning to celebrate it for the first time and to kind of show that the community was welcoming to folks from all walks of life as well. And so that's kind of how I officially got involved in this and officially became an ally, but I would consider myself an ally for a long, long time going back.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you for having me too. I would say that I have not always been an ally, but only because I learned that ally is an adverb and it's an action word. So I started out as a supporter of the LGBTQ community, thinking that I was an ally, and then it took me a long time to learn that I needed to take action in order to be an ally. So it's kind of been a journey for me to get to become an ally, which I'll share about more later with you. So yeah, it's been an adventure being an ally because when I thought I was being an ally, I was really being a supporter, which is fine. Like, you can be a supporter of the LGBTQ community if that's what you want to be. So I didn't always know that I wasn't being an ally, but I always had the heart of an ally. I just didn't know that that's not what I was doing. So
thank you. So as more youth and adults are able to safely share their gender and sexuality with other people, it's so important to have folks like you as allies and as supporters and, understanding and accepting where folks are in their journey as an ally as well. So, we live and we work with these people who are allies, who are LGBTQ community members, everywhere, and helping them to understand the importance of safe people and safe places is going to really help in, the longevity of our community. So, building overall happiness, building safety, and building community is such an important thing. And I hope to achieve that with this conversation. So just to segue into the online resources, I went over to the GLAAD website, which is a place that I visit frequently, and looking through what they have to say about allyship and what it means. So I'm going to quickly just read the 10 ways to be an ally that you can find on the GLAAD website, and I'll also link those in the YouTube description when I post this video. But first and foremost, they have as number one is to be a listener. Active listening is a skill that I know I need to work on, and being a listener can be hard at times. So that's definitely a really important first step for somebody as they're learning about allyship and learning about support for the LGBTQ community. Second, that goes along with that is being open-minded. If you have a fixed mindset and you're not open to suggestions or just different things in life, it can be really difficult to be an honest and supportive ally. Be willing to talk sort of goes along with that one too. These are kind of definitely building off of each other, I'm noticing. But just being open to having conversations like this one. Sometimes it might get tricky and difficult at times, but there's understanding that comes along with being willing to talk, and sort of getting to that point where I'm ready to do this can be difficult. After that, we have being inclusive and inviting LGBTQ friends to hang out with you and your friends and your family. Number 5 is not assuming that all your friends and coworkers are straight. Someone close to you could be looking for support in their coming out journey and process, and not making assumptions will give them the space they need to be able to find the right time, place, and maybe even the right words to be able to express that for themselves. Number 6 is anti-LGBTQ comments and jokes are harmful. Let your friends, family, and coworkers know that you find them offensive. This can be definitely difficult at times. I know I struggle with it. I'm definitely not a confrontational person, and I'm trying to work on my active allyship as well. But you know, calling those things out and naming them and being confrontational in that way to be a support is really important as an ally. Number 7 is confronting your own prejudices and biases, even if it's uncomfortable to do so. Definitely supported by that last one as well. Number 8 is to defend your LGBTQ friends against discrimination. Beth, I think that speaks to your point a little bit about actively taking steps to be a support and to defend your friends against discrimination. Number 9 is believing that all people, regardless of gender identity and sexual orientation, should be treated with dignity and respect. That's something that I feel is ever present in our Rutland community now. That is, you know, very, very important to our community. And I think that it's there, and it's in our language, it's in our rhetoric now. So just continuing to do that, and in incorporating it and including it in the job descriptions or stuff like that is a really good way to show, as an individual, as a company, as an institution, that you're an ally for the LGBTQ community. And lastly, if you see LGBTQ people being misrepresented in the media, you can always contact GLAAD at glad.org. That's definitely something that I think is harder to do as a smaller community, but it's definitely an important thing to keep in mind and consider. So any of those that stood out, any that you want to loop back to, any that you feel like maybe you're at or want to be at?
I think number 9 really jumped out for me. I mean, they're all good, but number 9 made me think of my mom. You know, I'm almost 60 years old and grew up in a very different era than today, as far as acceptance and people's ability to come out and be who they are. And my mom, you know, was quietly teaching that lesson, you know, 50 years ago when I was a little kid, about race, about gender identity, about, you know, sexual preference, in her own quiet way. And she was a very Catholic person, you know, believed firmly in church and in the faith as it was taught to her, but she could not stand to see people discriminated against or treated differently for just because of who they were. And in fact, I remember very distinctly a little later in my life, but during the civil unions debate, her very, for her, quite angrily letting our local bishop know that this church's position was not acceptable to her, even though she was well into her 70s at that time, and was within the first time she really spoke out publicly about something like this, especially against the church's view. So that one really rings for me big time.
Wow, that's awesome.
So GLAAD has updated that list of ways to be an ally since the last time that I visited it, which makes me feel better about my journey to being an ally. But one of the things that really struck me as a person who grew up in the era of LGBTQ terms being used as slurs against people, as an insult, I guess is the best way to phrase that, is how often other people didn't say, hey, that's not okay, or you shouldn't use that phrase as an insult, or what you're doing is not acceptable, like you should find a different word, or like any of those things. It was just, I guess I hate to say it was just accepted, but like that's the best way I can think of to say that that's just how it was. And so it really makes me think about now how even as, I want to say far back as high school, it wasn't that far back ago, is recently as when I was in high school, which was, I guess, almost 30 years now, which I suppose is far back. Um, that was just accepted. And in that 30 years, we've come so far, but still not far enough, where the language has changed and it's not acceptable anymore to use those terms and those words as ways to put people down or to joke around with people, which is more of what was going on. People would say those terms as kind of like a joking way to talk to their friends or their buddies or whatever,
Mm,
or to kind of insult them, which makes me wonder like why people think that that's acceptable in the first place, to use that kind of language with their friends and to insult people like that. But how we we use language in such a way that we have to constantly be reminding people, hey, like words hurt people, like the language has power, and once you take that language and you start telling people this is not acceptable, like it changes the way that we use words and how um, it can be tolerated or not tolerated.
mm,
So it's good that it's out there like that, because I think it really needs that constant reminder, like this is not okay, like in
mm,
if you hear it you have to step up and say like that's not okay, you have to use different words, or
mhm.
that word's not okay to use in that way.
Yeah. The biggest and most recent example I can think of for that, it just came across some kind of screen that I was looking at a few weeks ago, and it's the phrase "that's so gay." That was something I remember using myself, hearing other people use, and initially not thinking it was bad. And as I grew up and as I had more experiences with other human beings, um, now when I say it, like even as I just said it, I was like, that it feels so
It's cringe.
strange and often, yeah, cringy,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
Um,
It
but
really was part of the culture, as Beth said. I mean, one of my best friends from literally from diapers through high school um, used to call people queer all the time as a cut, and or even just casually like, "Oh, you're so queer." And it turns out he was gay, but didn't come out until he was into his 20s. And I never would have guessed it in a million years. He never in that era would have even allowed a hint of suspicion, around his sexuality, because the culture was so different then. I'm glad to, I'm embarrassed to admit that, I bet you couldn't find a person under 50 or 60 years old who didn't use those words in those ways
Mm,
when we were growing up. Happily, I think a lot of us have found, a better path and realized that, as Beth said, these things really do hurt and have an impact on people and how they grow up and how they feel about themselves and about their lives. And I'm just happy to be part of the conversation now and hopefully changing it here in Rutland County in particular.
mm, right on. Um, well, thank you for sharing your thoughts and opinions on that. I really appreciate it. And I feel like we could just sit and talk about this list for hours. So I'm going to move on to the next one. This article I found is coming from a website called Youth Engaged for Change. I need to do some more research on how they're involved in LGBTQ community, but they have a good list of resources. And so that leads me to believe that they are a good resource. But I'm going to keep a critical mind on this as I read through these. So defining ally, the word, the official definition is someone who has a strong, genuine concern for the well-being of LGBTQ people. I think, as you had said, Beth, that there are different meanings for it outside of just the definition on Google or Wiki. So that's one that I found. But a person who accepts and supports, does actions, advocates for equal rights and for fair treatment, doesn't just have to be for the LGBTQ community. We're definitely in need of that. So also a person who confronts challenges that LGBTQ people experience and believes that we face the problems in society that are listed below. So some of these issues that we've been dealing with are heterosexism, which is the assumption that everyone is or should be straight. Bi prejudice, which is harmful and preconceived ideas about bisexual people. Some of those could be, if you're bisexual, that means you need to have a preference. That does not always the case. So that's one example of that. Trans prejudice, same thing, but for harmful and preconceived ideas about transgender people. This sort of ties into the number 10 point about organizations and people being misrepresented in the media. I think a lot of movies have portrayed trans people as negative or dangerous or that sort of thing. So being an ally can also be calling those people out too. And then the last one is heterosexual privilege, which means everyday privileges that straight people have in society. Feeling comfortable in the bathroom that you choose to use, being able to walk down Church Street or the main street in Rutland here and holding the hand of your partner who may be the same sex as you. That's not always been a privilege for LGBTQ people, and it's definitely something, heterosexual privilege is still around. So any of those that you've never heard before, or any more to add on the meaning or the definition of being an ally?
Sure. So that was an excellent website that you found, by the way, or at least that article about being an ally. Because like I said, I used to think that being an ally just meant that you were somebody who supported whatever the thing was that you were supporting, because obviously you can be an ally for causes other than just the LGBTQ community. So that's what I did. Like, I was just like that person who was like, yeah, like I'm a big supporter of the LGBTQ community. Like, I believe that everybody should be able to love whoever they love or express themselves however they want. And I thought that was like being a good ally. Like, I thought that was as far as I needed to go, and that made me an ally. And what I learned over time, and it took time, probably, I'm not good at math on that quick. We'll just say like it was multiple years later. It was until I really had to put my allyship to the test, so to say, where I realized that was okay, but for me it wasn't enough. Like, I learned that being an ally and really meant like you had to like step up and put your money where your mouth is. And what did that mean for me? Meant that what was I going to do to really advocate for the LGBT community? And my passion, especially, is for the transgender community because I have a personal connection um, to the transgender community. And so it looked more like what kind of actions could I take as a person to make that advocacy more um, actionable, like doing research into like what are the causes that I could support, or what are the things that actively affect people who are transgender, and how can I make a difference to help those? Or what are the bills that are affecting transgender people, and how can I contact my legislation to say, yes, you should vote for these bills, or no, you should not vote for these bills, or getting involved with groups like PFLAG or Free Mom Hugs and going to like volunteer at Pride events. So I think that it depends really on who you are as a person and what level of involvement you want to um, extend, like what being an ally means for you, because I think that it's really different for everybody. Like, I think that um, as long as you understand for you, like where your heart is and what um, level you're willing to commit to, I think that even just saying I'm a person who supports the LGBT community and I believe that everybody should love who they love or express themselves however they want, is even that's okay. Like, I think where I was for that chunk of years was fine until it wasn't. But it wasn't that it wasn't fine for being an ally, it's just that it wasn't fine for me anymore. And I realized, hey, like, you're more invested now. Like, what are you going to do to really make a difference, because it was just more personal for me. And so that's where my allyship changed. But I don't think that it really has to be that way for everybody unless they want it to be. So
I think I don't know if it was the last point you made, Andrew, from that list, the thing about heterosexual privilege. I bet you that if you asked 1,000 people on the streets of Rutland if they knew what that was, they probably would look at you blankly 99 or 990 times out of that 1,000.
Yeah.
I had never heard that phrase before, and quite frankly, being a white male in America, I'm certainly aware of the privilege I've had compared to people of color, and never previously heard that phrase or really gave it a lot of thought about what my privilege is. But you're absolutely right. No one would ever think twice about me walking down the street with my wife hand in hand or anything like that. And that really, that kind of, I hadn't heard the phrase before today, but I had thought about the topic quite a bit because I have, a lot of people in my life who I know, have dealt with those issues. I just never had the phrase, the privilege part of it tied to it. But it really is amazing how that lack of privilege affects people. Part of the reason I got involved recently in the I Love Rutland's new campaign to support the LGBTQ community was because of Avery Provin, telling me a really personal story about how, his lack of that privilege has affected his whole life up until now. And it was gut wrenching to hear it. And I'm sure he, gave me the, Reader's Digest, very sanitized version of what his life has been like. But it still was really powerful and gut wrenching. So I think, most people, going back to something Beth said earlier, most people think that they're an ally just because they support equal rights or, lack of discrimination. But clearly that's not enough if you really care about people who are LGBTQ. You got to do more than that. It's just like, the white privilege not being a racist isn't enough. You got to be an anti-racist if you really want to change things in this country, because we're so far, we've been in certain place for a long time. And yes, we've made progress on both of those fronts over time, but we still have a long way to go on both fronts, obviously.
Mm-hmm. I gotta say that made me feel really good hearing that, not good that you didn't know it, but to be able, like, this is what the purpose of this video podcast was if you didn't know something, you learned something new. If you knew something already, you could speak more on it. And I'm so thrilled that, even in this brief video that we have together, that you were able to put the name and the term to what it was that you already could see and witness.
Yeah.
And it makes me very optimistic about the future of Rutland community and the turning point that I feel like we're at. I've only been here for 6 years. I went to school here, and I'm not a local in my mind right now, but knowing that that's there, and that people like you are starting to I don't know, it made me feel good. I just wanted to name that feeling, and I'm glad that you talked about that.
Yeah. The other thing I'll just add, that something you just said made me think of it. There's a lot of people in Rutland County. This is a good community. There's good people here, but there's a lot of people who are willing to just sit on the sidelines. And the reality of our community is we're shrinking. As a region, the population is shrinking all over the Northeast. And if we want to be a vibrant community that's going to grow, we need to welcome everybody here, whether they're from a different community, a different state, a different religion, a different ethnic background, a different LGBTQ member of that community. It doesn't matter. We've got to welcome everybody. And as long as people are continuing to fight those battles, we're just cutting our own throats, frankly, economically. I know we're not here to talk about economics, but for those people who might be watching this and think, oh, it doesn't bother me, it doesn't affect me one way or the other, I don't need to get involved. Well, it really does. If we as a community don't welcome anyone who's interested in coming here and make it a welcoming place, this place is going to dry up like a prune over time, because we're just, the population's getting older, and we've got to combat that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my partner and I have had that conversation before of, is this the place that we want to stay? Is this the place that we feel the most accepted and the most needed? And, like those things that you look for in a community. Some of those are definitely there, and that's why we've stayed. But we are also staying because we want that to, and we want to be the people to help to support that. So I really appreciate you saying that. So some ways to sort of segue again into thinking about the future, or thinking about ways that you can be an ally. The last bit of this is, number one, stay informed. If you don't know the difference between sex and gender or current LGBTQ related news and issues, go ahead and educate yourself. Ask your questions, do your research, and don't be afraid to be honest about what you don't know. There are some awesome blog posts out there. I know that, Beth, being a writer, you have some resources that could potentially be helpful for folks. So if you're comfortable with that, I can always give you a nice plug. And
yeah, sure. And my blog post started because I didn't know those things. Like, I honestly didn't know the difference between sexuality and gender when I started my journey. Like, I thought they were the same thing. And so I had to learn that, in fact, they were not. And so a lot of my writing comes from sharing what I didn't know and what I learned. And so I share it with other people so that they can learn from what I have learned. And
what's the name of your blog post? Is it just plain Beth?
Yeah, .com.
.com. All right. I can always add that too. Yeah, and that's a really great resource for, do you want to speak a little bit about that, or do you want to?
So sure, yeah, I will. I mean, it's not, I do write about being an ally, but mostly I have a website that is geared towards parents of transgender kids, any age. Okay, I use the term kids loosely because my kids are young adults, so they're not children anymore. but I try to write to the broader audience of people who have kids who've come out as being transgender, and what that means. Because when my kids came out as being transgender, I was like lost. I didn't know where to go to turn to find out the things that I needed to know, which was a lot because I didn't know anything. And so there wasn't a lot of information out there at the time for me to discover those things, which was, and it wasn't the like, this is the definition, this is what it means, here's the difference between this or that. I could find that information, but what I wanted to know was what is it like from a parent's point of view? And 5 years ago, that was not out there. There wasn't people writing about it now like they writing about it like they are now. And I think it's because people were not as comfortable about it 5 years ago, sharing about it. And so I started sharing about it, and other people started sharing about it after. And so I think that the more people start talking about something that's hard or scary or uncomfortable, and other people who are experiencing the same thing say, oh, hey, so and so over here is talking about this thing, and so over here is talking about this thing, I think it's maybe okay for me to start talking about too. Then the more information gets out there, and then it kind of paves the way for other people to come after. And so I just started doing it mostly for me at first because I needed to. Writing's how I express myself and how I work through all the things that I need to work through and process what I'm feeling and thinking. And but bigger for other people to say, okay, like, here's what I have uncovered, here's what I've learned, here's what I've experienced. So if you find yourself in the same place where I have been, here's what I want you to know, so that like you don't have to find yourself in that same lost, scary place where I was wondering like all the things that I was wondering and didn't have any answers for. So
Yeah.
it's mostly articles about, some about mental health. I do book reviews. I read books about being transgender, some kids' books, and then I like write a review about them, stuff like that. So
Nice. So yeah, staying informed and reaching out or following somebody's path as you continue to learn, which leads me to the next one, sort of related to a topic that we had discussed earlier, which are speaking up. There are so many reasons why people don't speak up when they hear something offensive, like that's so gay. It can be awkward and people don't know what to say or don't want to make sense of the situation or make it worse, but the words can hurt. And when you speak up, it educates others, lets them know that their words are not acceptable, and may give others the courage to speak up as well. So you can also change how people are acting in the future, which is so powerful. The third one is to be honest. Speak openly about family members, friends, and colleagues who are LGBTQ if they are out and comfortable with you discussing it with others. Little tidbit, very important to get that green light from the person to be able to, hey, this is something that I think I might want to share with others. Are you okay with me doing that? Great way to get consent.
I think that's part of the reason that we're making progress. When I was a kid, no one talked about this. I mean, I know for a fact I have relatives who lived for 30 or more years and never once was it ever discussed. They never acknowledged it. No one else ever discussed it. And today they're living happily out, but they were, in one case I could think of a relative who was well into their 40s before they ever came out in any way. And it, back a generation or two ago, it just, people did not want to talk about this. And the fact that we can now, we're making progress. It's slow, but we got, some progress behind us already.
Definitely. Yeah. the next one was supporting equality. Support policies at school, work, or other places that help protect LGBTQ people from discrimination. Even if these issues seem small, they can have a big impact on people's lives. If you see or hear an unfair rule or policy, talk to a peer or a trusted adult about your concerns and what you can do to make change. We actually, just before I hopped on this video podcast with you both, we had our July meeting for the Crystal Queer group that I facilitate and am doing this podcast for. And we had talked about some of the school policies within Rutland County and are trying to be educated on those and to support any students who might feel like they need extra support in school and day-to-day going to class, facing any discrimination or anything that's coming up in schools. So yeah, definitely supporting equality, supporting equity. And then the last one is to come out as an ally. Anyone can be an ally regardless of their sexual orientation and or gender identity. You can be a straight cis white male, you can be a trans male, you can be a cis white woman, a mom, a dad, anybody can be an ally. But being proud to support the LGBTQ community is definitely a plus and a help. Remembering that being an ally can be such things as joining an LGBTQ group, or maybe a GSA or a student-run group, or as simple as showing your support online, liking our Facebook posts and helping us to get our word out and across to other folks and to build our community, to support others, and to be inclusive for everyone. So letting others know that you're an ally is such an important thing to do and so helpful for LGBTQ folks. So that's what I've got. By no means are we all experts on this subject, but we're speaking from our personal experiences and the resources and the research that we've done, and want to help articulate things as accurately and as accurately as possible. So that's all I have. Is there anything that you both would like to add in closing or anything like that?
I just put a punctuation mark, an exclamation point on what you just said about speaking out. I've been shocked, honestly, at how much positive feedback I've gotten for just what I've done in the last couple months working on the I Love Rutland campaign from members of the LGBTQ community. It clearly has meant a lot to them that folks behind that campaign, brought the Progress Pride flag into the heart of the I Love Rutland campaign. And it really has shocked me how much that's meant to people, and that I personally have been involved. So I just encourage anybody out there who's watching this to think about how they can be involved, how they can help support people in their community and around them who are dealing with these issues. And you will be shocked equally about how much appreciation there is for getting involved.
I'm one of those people. I was just thinking about it today on my drive home from work, driving through Rutland and seeing the biggest Progress flag on the big sign on the hospital there. That just fills my heart up every time I drive by. I love it. And I think it was a great addition to add the Progress flag in there. That was a wonderful way to show. But yeah, keeping that going for our community and not just in June, but in all the months, to be able to be a support and an ally.
Yeah,
I appreciate that, Steve. Beth, did you say that you didn't have anything?
I wasn't gonna, but I was just, while you were just talking about the flags, I just have a small story to share about that. So I live in a very small town in southwestern New Hampshire, and for a long time we did not have a pride flag hanging on our house, and it was one of those things that we waffled back and forth about. Should we hang a flag? Should we not hang a flag? We live in a very Republican town, and it was one of those safety issues that we talked about, hanging the flag or not hanging the flag. And finally I was like, you know what, I'm just going to do it. I don't care. Like whatever happens, happens, or putting the flag up. And so we hung a pride flag off of our house maybe I want to say like 3 years ago now. And in the past 3 years, 4 or 5 other houses now in the area of my town that I drive through, because our town is like very hilly. So there's parts of my town that I never even see, have put pride flags up on their houses. So sometimes it just takes like one person to go first, because there are other people out there who are like, I want to do this thing, but like, I just am not sure about it. And they just need that like little nudge from somebody else to be like, oh, that person over there is doing it, so I can do it too. They just need someone else to like take that step and go first. And you never know who's watching you and just waiting for like you to do that thing. So
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you all so much for being here and for listening as we are becoming better allies every day. So thank you, Steve, and thank you, Beth, very much.
thank you.
Thank you.